add costs to these. So when you set up a generic, if you're trying to track how much a project is going to cost you, you can add costs to these generic resources. You can also build them into your billing rules so that you can track what you're going to bill for these resources if you're trying to forecast from your task assignments or bookings. The next slide we want to show, and there's a few of them that are in the same vein, is how to identify the right resources for your projects. There's a few options that you have to do this, and most of them involve the skill profile in OpenAir. But we're going to talk about the first one that doesn't before we get into the skill profiles, and that's a job code substitution. From your resource listing, your booking list view that you can hopefully see in the back here, you have these magnifying glasses next to a booking. What that allows you to do is do a search, and you can see all of the folks who have a job code that's the same as that person that's on that booking. And that allows you to do a very simple search, a very simple substitution based on just their job code. So if you know that you need just a project manager and you're using that as a job code, you can use this search to identify all of the project managers in your organization. And when you see the search results come up, they do show their booked availability for the next, X number of weeks or months. And so you have that view that you can judge, okay, this person looks available, this person does not. But again, that's based pretty solely right at this point on the job code. There's some more robust settings that you can use to find resources. The first one is this quick search, and this does revolve around the skill profile. And just a quick answer to your question on the chat line, a user cannot have multiple job codes. There is a single job code per user. So you're going to find that some of these more robust methods for searching are probably going to match your needs. So let's talk about skill profiles briefly. A skill profile in OpenAir is a way that you can set up a set of skills or experiences or certifications that you can then identify which of your resources has which skills and to what level. For example, if you're a technical organization, you may have a set of skills called programming language, and you may have in there Java and Perl and those types of options. And you can then set these folks are available, and these folks have this particular skill set, and to what extent. One second, let me see if I can accommodate a request that I was just receiving. For those folks on the chat, if you let me know if you can still see that. Okay, thank you. So technical skills are one area, like the programming language or a database experience. You have other options such as foreign languages that you can use. You identify who speaks fluently in French, German, Spanish, Japanese, whatever it is that you're interested in. You can also list preferences, who's willing to travel, who's available to travel, who has a passport, who doesn't. Any of these things that you want to measure on a resource, you can add to your skill profiles. Now, a word of caution on these. I don't think there is an area in OpenAir that can get more over-engineered than this. From what I've seen, and it's very common, more often than not, when folks are building up their skill profiles, they're putting in anything that anybody can think of that they've ever needed in their organization ever. And so they've got, they've listed out of their 100 resources or whatever, they've identified the 2 that have Fortran experience, and they've identified the one person that can speak Latin, or things that really aren't going to be useful to you ever, or at least not to any significant extent. So you have to be really careful that you don't clutter these. The more options you put in here, the harder it is for people to search, and the less likely they are to use it. So you need to come up with a philosophy for your organization, whether or not you want to put in just the common skills that you know you will need on a frequent basis, or if you want to add to that the somewhat obscure or unique skills that you will need, just not as often. So it's a difficult balance to strike. We tend to recommend that you stick with the skills that you know you need the most often. But the answer to your question is, if it will help us staff the appropriate resource frequently, we need it in there. That's kind of how you can judge that. So with a quick search, you have this option in the resources module. It's under search and it just says quick. And when you click that, it shows you the types of skills that you have: technology, language, experience, whatever it is that you have, industry. And you can select that and it'll display a list of all of your users, all of your resources, with that column as the first column in the list. And you can filter that down at that point. So it's called a quick search for a reason. It's very quick. It doesn't give you the ability to drill down terribly far. It doesn't give you the ability to select multiple criteria. It's just, show me the technology skill, and here's all the users, and here's the ones they have, and you can then use a drop down at the top of that column to filter. There's a few others. There's chart views and planner views, etc. But what we want to get into are the other types of searches that you can do. The next one is this custom search. You saw on that previous slide there was a search link and then a quick and a custom under that. And this is the custom search. This screen should look pretty familiar, even if you haven't used the custom search, because it looks just like so many OpenAir screens, where you have the filters at the top that you can select. You have some user entity tag availability. You have these various checkboxes that you can check on this, and it gives you a much more robust way of searching for the people that you're interested in a format that is very familiar to anybody who has used OpenAir to any extent. The great thing about this is that availability, really. It's not going to show you, if you set it to show you, I need somebody who's available 50% of their time, then you've immediately removed the need to wade through everybody who's already booked, that you can't book on a project because they're already spoken for. And so you have that, that ability to limit your searches based on availability as well as booking types. So you can, if you're using the default soft hard booking types that the tool ships with, you can say, I don't want to see anybody who's booked hard because they're not available, but maybe somebody who's booked soft I do want to look at. So you have that ability with these searches. The most recent addition is this advanced resource search. And this looks a little different, although it is fitting with the newer look and feel that OpenAir has been rolling out over the last couple of releases. And this gives you a lot of the same types of abilities that you had in the custom search, just in a what folks might consider a more user-friendly format and view. This is found in the same location as the custom and quick searches. It's just a third option in that drop-down now. And what it provides is this screen with a couple of tabs, some general parameters. If you have a saved search here, you can use that, which is nice. This is the first opportunity you've had to do a saved resource search. If you have a specific resource type, you can use that as a filter. And then again, you have the availability and entity tag filters here. In addition, with the second tab, you have the skills and experience, and you can identify the skills that you're looking for people to have and what level of experience you need them to have. So in our case, we've identified the user state, whether they're an employee or a subcontractor, and how much OpenAir experience they have. But we could use any set of our skills and experiences that we've set up in our skill profiles here. You can also see at the bottom of the screen how many people match this particular set. Now, if you know much about, this is from our instance of OpenAir, and if you know much about our organization, we don't have 63 resources, and we never have had 63 resources at any given time. So what you're looking at here is a search that is not filtered on active resources. So this does, in fact, give you the ability to search on inactive resources. Well, why would you want to do that? The reason you might want to do that is if you have a subcontractor or contractor pool that you don't have listed as open users, as active users in OpenAir, but that are available to you as freelance type of contractors, you could then search on them even though they're not active and identify which ones have the skills that you're interested in. All in all, it's a pretty powerful search engine in this particular format if you have your skill profiles updated. Somebody mentioned in the chat that they've added a number of skills to keep up with the technologies and certifications that people might have, but they haven't removed them, and so the lists keep growing and growing and growing. A common problem, again, that these just get out of control fast. So I can't caution enough that you would want to have some form of a process to keep these updated before you decide to venture into using them. Another option that some folks use is that they allow the resources to maintain their own profiles, which is good and bad. It removes the need to have that centralized, and so you don't have one person trying to judge who's an expert in what, or you don't have individual managers having to keep that up. The downside is obviously that people could enter themselves as experts in any particular area, whether they truly are or not. One way around that is OpenAir has recently allowed what they call skill profile approvals. And so you can allow your users or whomever to change skill profiles, and those changes go through an approval process before they're considered production. And so that it still requires you to have a centralized approver or centralized approval process, but it does push the responsibility of keeping this up to date back on the end users. Okay, we want to talk a little bit about resource substitution. There's a couple of ways to do this. One way is through the Personnel tab on a project. When you click the Personnel tab on your project, you'll get a listing of the team. It'll show everybody that you've got booked or assigned to your project, including generic resources, as you can see here. And when you click that, you have the option of substituting that with another person. Now, this doesn't really show you who's available or what the impact of the substitution will be. It assumes that you've already looked at your resource searches and you've identified that this is the person you want to substitute, and you're able to select that here. And you also have the ability to manipulate how their allocation is if they're already assigned to that particular task. You can increase their allocation up to 100%. You can increase it to whatever percent it should actually be, or you can keep it the same. This is a decent way of doing substitutions, but OpenAir has improved upon this in recent releases. What you're going to see here is the resource comparison table. Now, this is controlled by the scales icon that you'll see on the left side of your screen in OpenAir. In most screens, it's there. And what this allows you to do, when you pull it up, it allows you to select various resources. Here I've selected 3 folks from our organization. And it allows you to say, show me their availability from this date to that date, in this case today through October, the next 3 months basically. And I want to see the utilization, their availability. I want to see what they have listed in terms of these various skills. Do they have NetSuite? Do they have OpenAir? Do they have Delboomi? And of course, this particular profile makes me look like an idiot, which may be accurate, but I can at least say that in this particular case, I haven't updated this profile in our sandbox in many years. So that's why these values look kind of wonky, is that you have to ensure that your folks are keeping their skill profiles up to date or this becomes useless. Once you look at this, then you can say, this is the person that I want for my project, and I can go ahead and create a booking for this. Oh, this is the right person. Look at the availability. This looks nice. And it gives you these abilities to compare these resources against one another. And you can use this to identify the right resources for your projects, and then it'll automatically take you to that booking screen. When you click the button, you can create the booking for that person. I do not know the maximum number of resources that you can technically compare at one point. I haven't ever pushed it to its limit. However, as you can see by the amount of real estate each comparison takes, you're pretty much limited to 4 or 5 before you're starting to run out of space and it starts to shrink or wrap or get a little bit less useful. So you probably want to limit this to just a few, half dozen or less at any given time. So achieving your organizational goals, there's a few items we want to talk through on this. Obviously, a big part of scheduling and managing your bench is utilization tracking. A lot of folks have different variations of what utilization means to them, but it really doesn't make a lot of difference to most organizations what it means because you're measuring it across your organization in the same manner. You can use your utilization reports to identify past trends in utilization, who's been busy in the past. You can use it to forecast utilization to show who is expected to be busy in the future. And you can compare those reports based on job codes, or you can compare them against your skill profiles, and that allows you to see what skill sets do these folks have that are in demand, that we're having heavy forecasts for or heavy past utilizations. So utilization reports are a big piece of the scheduling. You can also turn those utilization reports into nice, pretty dashboard graphs that you can instantly see on your dashboard, people that are available, who's not, and those types of metrics that you might want to have immediately available to you. Another method of determining what your capacity truly is analyzing people's non-billable time. I recently went through this exercise internally within TopStep and found a lot of eye-opening examples where people that looked like they might be less busy because they had a lot of non-billable time were actually working on projects in that non-billable capacity in terms of potentially sales assistance or assistance with a contract that had not yet been signed, an at-risk piece of work. And we're able to analyze that and say, well, this person's been non-billable X percent of their time, but that's going to become billable. They're not as available as they seem. And you can have the opposite result as well when you're analyzing that non-billable time. One recommendation that we provide to our clients is to mark the non-billable tasks and projects as tasks and projects that require the users to enter notes against, so that you have some kind of an idea of what that non-billable time is doing. And again, staff training is a big element of increasing your utilization. We tend to, at TopStep, we tend to want to do things for folks. It's the way that we're wired. It's our nature. And we get ourselves, on occasion, we'll get ourselves into a little bit of a trap where we do a lot for our clients without giving them a thorough understanding of what we're doing or how we're doing it. And we take a step back and we regroup and come back to teaching our clients what needs to be done instead of simply doing it for them. And the reason I bring that up is not to show the warts within our own organization, but to identify that that's a really common problem in most of the organizations that we work with. Those who know do, and instead of showing other people what they're doing, because it seems like it would go so much faster if they just did it themselves. And we try to push away from that. We try to show our clients what we're doing, teach them how to do it, because we don't want them to have to rely on us consistently into the future. So that's really what we had to cover today, just a few points in our summary. Before you start down an initiative with these types of situations, identify what your organization really needs and identify who the players are in your resource management and scheduling processes. Do you have a central resource management resource? Do you want to have centralized resource management? If so, how would you structure that? Identify those items before you start delving into these types of activities. Otherwise, you'll find yourself establishing a policy that you're constantly changing, and before too long, your users are not using it because they can't keep up on what the policy is today. Plan out what you're going to do and configure the resource module appropriately, again, before you roll this out. If you're constantly changing your resource module configuration, you're going to have the same problem. People will stop using it. You'll have very low adoption because they're getting confused and they're not sure what it looks like from one day to the next. Implement processes to support scalability. A lot of this goes back to that centralized resource management function. If you have a growth plan to increase your revenue X% and thus increase your number of employees X%, but your resource module and your resource plan is set very strictly to only be able to function for what you have today, you've set yourself up to fail. And you're going to have the same problem that we talked about just a minute ago, where you're constantly having to change your processes. So implement processes that may seem like overkill today, but are designed to match your growth goals as much as they are your current situation. And then evaluating your data. Most of our clients want to have a process where they're going back and looking at their non-billable time, and they're analyzing their utilization and determining what skills are in high demand and why their capacity was XYZ, a month ago, and now it's ABC. And they have these, all the data is there, and the desire to analyze it is there. Yet, so many of our clients don't take that step for one reason or another. Either A, they're not sure how, or B, they don't have the time to do it. Again, it's something that seems like overhead, if you will, bureaucracy. Take the time to do it because it's worth it. It's not a waste of time. It's time very well spent. It is informative to your executive teams. It's informative to your business model. It's informative to your capacity planning. And you can use that data to achieve the goals that you have in those areas. There's very little point in having all of that data available to you if you don't take this step in terms of analyzing it and using it.